Hi everyone, it's Gary here, and very warm welcome to the fourth official and a very special look at some of the new faces that we will be seeing in Scottish football for the season ahead. I say new faces, some of them are very old faces that are coming back to Scotland, but one certainly new face, a new voice joining us in the fourth official, making their fourth official debut with me on this show is Rebecca Shaw. Rebecca, a very warm welcome to the fourth official.
Thank you very much. I'm very excited to be on and talking everything managers today.
Yeah, so Rebecca is one of the members of the Absolute Football podcast, and people that have been following us here on the fourth official recently will know we had Sam from the Absolute Football pod giving us a bit of a Europa League preview just ahead of the Man United Spurs platform. But Absolute Football does, 4 shows a week, celebrating all sorts of different football content. So before we get into what we do here, do you want to talk to us a bit about your background?
Yeah, so I have been on the Absolute Football podcast for I think going on 2 years, it might be now. On there, I cover 3 of the shows, or I have done. So we have just expanded to 4. We cover National League, North, South, and even lower. Premier League, where I cover Everton and also do a Scottish Premiership roundup, which is always fun to do, and it's really insightful to be able to share that. We have a women's podcast as well, which I've covered, and then lower league, which is everything from the EFL, which I seem to just have a collection of teams. So I also cover Accrington Stanley with them, in which I am the Her Game 2 ambassador. So I do a lot of close work with the club.
Fab. Yeah, and given the fact that you've got a close interest in Scottish football and you're the voice of Scottish football on Absolute, we thought it was good to get you up here into the fourth official world and talk a little bit about the 4 new managerial appointments in the Scottish Premiership for the new season ahead. Now, people that do know you, Rebecca, will know that you've got a close affinity with Dundee Football Club. I'll let you share that story in a little while as to why that's been the case. But we've got a new man at the helm in charge at Dundee for the new season ahead. And it's not a face that's certainly unfamiliar to fans of Scottish football, but Stephen Pressley coming back into a top job in football for the first time in 5 years. Replacing Tony Docherty. And I think it's fair to say that the arrival of Stephen Pressley certainly seemed a bit of a left field appointment. So Tony Docherty had done the rounds in Scottish football previous to getting the Dundee job, being Derek McInnes' assistant at Aberdeen. Did a relatively decent job at Dundee with limited resources, but he was sacked at the end of last season, and Stephen Pressley coming in, having been involved at Brentford in a kind of coaching capacity over the last kind of couple of years. And I think it's fair to say that not a lot of people were expecting this to be the move. The likes of Sean Maloney had been mentioned as being the bookie's favourite for the role before Pressley was appointed. But as a Dundee fan, what's your take on the appointment?
It is an interesting one, and it will be interesting to see what he can achieve with Dundee. Like, the past season hasn't been the greatest for us, relegation battle and quite a few issues that did come in to the season, whether that was injuries or just creating our own problems was one of the main things. I think I know that you'll enjoy mentioning this one, but it was like the 4-3 against Rangers, being 3-1 up to then concede as we did, and that was just like the story of our season because it just kept happening. But hopefully we'll be able to bring something new into the side and change it up a bit. He knows the Prem from his time playing in it, so yeah, things will have changed, but it's one of them where he has the knowledge behind what can make a good Scottish Prem side. He does have managerial experience, which of course is always going to be a positive coming into a side like Dundee that does need the support from the manager quite heavily with what like we've seen last season. And hopefully get a few more signings through the door, especially with his connections with Brentford and previous jobs. We could then see different players coming in, especially with the retained list coming out with the likes of Joe Shaughnessy, Tiffany as well going. So they are quite big, influential names that have left. So it will be an interesting appointment, but I do hope that it's a good one for us.
Yeah, there is going to have to be quite a squad overhaul for Stephen Pressley to try and negotiate, obviously, out with the players you just mentioned there, Shaughnessy and Tiffany. Diego Portale is another one who's left at the end of his contract. Obviously, Lyle Cameron, who joined Rangers officially yesterday, but obviously that was a pre-contract that we knew about from the January window. And there's the case of Josh Mulligan, which is obviously continuing to roll on as well. Also had been linked with Rangers during this window. The likes of Charlton Athletic also very keen on Mulligan, who is out of contract, hasn't signed a new one as of yet. Pressley very keen to try and retain, but it's certainly my understanding is that is looking unlikely at this stage with regards to Mulligan staying. And I think when you take the likes of Mulligan, Lyle Cameron, plus the other players that have left, the likes of Shaughnessy and Tiffany and Portales, there's quite a changing of the guard, obviously needed at Dundee in terms of new players needing to come in to replace the ones that have gone out. And it might give an opportunity for maybe some of their younger players to maybe step up to the plate. And that's something that certainly Pressley will have had experience of doing in his time with kind of Brentford's kind of unders teams.
Yeah, it'll give the likes of Finlay Robertson, I know he is a fan favourite amongst Dundee fans, a very talented youngster as well. So it's like him coming into the side a bit more and filling the boots of Lyle Cameron. It will be a tough job because we've seen how creative and how much of a strong player Lyle Cameron is. But Finlay Robertson, he is a very talented youngster. We could also see the likes of Ryan Astley coming into the side in centre-back. He was in and out of the squad quite often in the season, but that was one of the areas that I do think they need to strengthen a bit in defence because the partnership pairings just kept changing. And then, like I mentioned before, there were a few issues within like the squad in terms of conceding and things like that. So it will be interesting to see what we end up doing defensive wise, but would love to see the likes of Ryan Astley starting again because, again, a youngster. So it will be an exciting time, but it is also a nervy one of who are we going to be able to get in because like losing Josh Mulligan, an influential player that can play in numerous positions, who can cover different aspects of the pitch. It's one of them where he will be a big miss. And he also wasn't included in the squad numbers today. So it is looking very likely that he is on his way out, which is very, very sad, but that's football, I guess.
Yeah, and I think that's the case for a side like Dundee. Obviously, we've seen recently the likes of Luke McCowan moving on to Celtic. Before then, Glenn Kamara obviously coming to Rangers as well. So players don't tend to stay with Dundee if they manage to kind of get to a certain level. And I think that's for a team like Dundee is right, where can they find the next Lyle Cameron or the next Josh Mulligan that can come through the ranks and try and develop them and try and maybe move them on a bit quicker rather than losing them at the end of contract and not getting big fees for them. Because I think that will certainly be the downside when you look at John Nelms and the Dundee board would have certainly wanted to try and get more of a fee in for some of their bigger assets to allow them the chance to maybe reinvest a little bit into the squad. Because as you mentioned, this time last year, they invested an awful lot into the infrastructure at Dens Park, that kind of much heralded bad pitch that was ripped up and certainly played a lot better last year. But we've even seen this summer that beer and gin festival had to be cancelled at Dens Park due to the weather in Dundee. So with the new stadium kind of still on hold or not quite finalised, you can understand their kind of reticence to not spend too much on Dens Park.
Yeah, you can see it. It's one of them where it's like always got to be smart when it comes to the money aspect of it with the likes of, I know in like the Premier League and everything with your FFP and all of that good stuff that goes on behind the scenes. It's always safer to just play it safe and prioritise certain aspects of the club.
So in terms of Stephen Pressley, the fact that he's got history of having played for Dundee's city rivals United, obviously experience with likes of Hearts and Celtic and Rangers as well in Scotland in his younger days. But he's one that's going to have to hit the ground relatively quickly in terms of trying to kind of turn around that kind of negative opinion that some of the Dundee support may well have for him. And he's certainly going to have to get off to a fast start, given the fact that Dundee have obviously got some rather tricky looking fixtures in the Premier Sports Cup before the season starts. The likes of Airdrie, Alloa, Bonnyrigg Rose in that group stage, all that could be kind of potential kind of banana skins, but you would expect Dundee to kind of come through that group relatively unscathed.
Yeah, it will be interesting to see how he starts the season. I do feel as though a positive start in the cup will see fans be like, right, get behind him as much as we can, and we'll like it's one of them. You can put the Dundee United behind us if he's able to get the team playing how we want and how we know Dundee can play. So I feel as though starting off the season with a positive cup run will be really good, and then it will be interesting to see how it does lead into the season, because we know that the teams will alter within the group stages of the cup, so it'll be also trying to see what works best at the same time. So it will be interesting to see strategies as well, because we know it's going to differ from what we've seen over the past 2 seasons with Doherty. So it will be an interesting one, but hopefully we can start on a positive and we just keep going from there.
I think as well, I think it's fair to say that Tony Docherty wasn't a universally popular manager with a lot of the Dundee support anyway. So I think there certainly was some aspects of the Dundee support would have been quite pleased to see him moved on at the end of last season. Maybe not quite as excited at the fact that the guy that's coming in doesn't have a massive pedigree in terms of a successful managerial career, but was heavily thought of in that Brentford coaching setup. And as you mentioned earlier, it may well give him access to maybe some of Brentford's youngsters that are certainly nowhere near ready Premiership level, but could be wanting to go out and get some exposure to first team football at a good level.
Yeah, I think like loan moves are crucial when it comes to young players, and Dundee have taken on quite a few. I mean, Adewumi last season coming in from Burnley, he was one of the best players for us during the season, and it just shows like his development throughout the season was incredible. So I feel as though if we are able to get these youngsters on loan, it could help with the team, and it's also like the building of the future of getting a lot of our academy lads to come up as well, which will be really important. But I do think his links could be quite crucial.
Yep. One player already in the door, ex-Hibs and St Johnstone winger Drew Wright, who's come in on a free transfer. He obviously his contract with relegated St Johnstone had expired at the end of last season, and he obviously comes in with obviously a lot of Premiership experience, and I think he will certainly fill the gap that may well be left behind by Josh Mulligan if it looks as if he is going to be moving on.
Yeah, I feel like we need the experience as well, because then you've got the like as we've said, the younger lads are able to then bounce off it, which is always going to be key. I mean, like him, a quick player as well, so it is one of them where to have that experience, have the senior head as well, will just be really key to be able to try and help steer the team forward.
Yep. So we will see how Elvis gets on in the building up at Dens Park as those games start, obviously in the Premier Sports Cup in a few weeks' time. A lot of business, I think, to be done, bit of wheeling and dealing to kind of mould that Dundee squad to get some new players in. Talking about ex-Dundee managers and Tony Docherty, obviously his former boss, Derek McInnes, has also been on the move this summer, Rebecca. Obviously at Kilmarnock, he found himself moving to Hearts, who sacked Neil Critchley at the tail end of last season. Certainly wasn't a surprise that he ended up at Hearts, and obviously there was that decision for him to not take charge of the final game of the season for Kilmarnock up against Hearts. Massively experienced, obviously, within the Scottish game, having obviously spent 8 years at Aberdeen. Previously to that, he'd been St Johnstone manager, and then obviously doing very, very well at Kilmarnock. Although I think it's safe to say that last year that Kilmarnock squad he had probably did underachieve in terms of where they performed in the league. I think they had a bad start to the season when they were in Europe, and they never really recovered from that, although they were never really in any real relegation trouble. But it was a poor season all in for Kilmarnock, and he'll be looking now to try and get Hearts firing, having seen Hearts have a really poor season by their standards last season as well.
Yeah, it was a difficult one for Hearts last season. There were issues on and off the pitch. I mean, like the uncertainty with the manager, it was a case of, was it like 2 managers he sacked in a season? So it was one of them where it was like you had that uncertainty with it, but then there was also now having the stability of Derek McInnes will be incredible for Hearts. Like you've said, a very intelligent manager. He knows the game and he has the experience. Hearts are a talented side, and they are a team that can be fighting for them top European places. And I do feel as though with Derek in charge, this could be a case for them. He's won trophies before with Aberdeen, and it'll be interesting to see what he can turn this Hearts side into.
Yeah, I think it's going to be an important season. I think not only for Derek McInnes, but also for Hearts. So we saw both Hearts and Hibs last season have a really, really poor start to the season, and then Hibs got their act together quite strongly in the second half of the season to finish third in the table, taking advantage a little bit of Aberdeen's capitulation at times as well. But Hearts fans will not have enjoyed being second best in Edinburgh last season, and there'll be an awful lot of pressure on Derek McInnes' shoulders to try and get an underperforming Hearts squad back to the levels of being the third force in Scottish football, because certainly Aberdeen, who won the Scottish Cup, Hibs obviously finishing third, there's a bit of work, I think, for Hearts to do to get back into that conversation. And McInnes will be under a fair bit of pressure because it didn't work for Stephen Naismith last year. It certainly didn't work for Neil Critchley. And with Tony Bloom's investment into Hearts, obviously made the Elton Cabangu signing permanent in the summer, alongside a Portuguese striker, Claudio Lopez, who's came in as well. So it'd be interesting to see just what Hearts do in terms of being able to get themselves back into that level. I think one thing that Derek McInnes has always been able to do is build from the back and kind of be a bit more stable. Does need to decide what will happen in goals. Craig Gordon in his final season as a professional this year, he's going to have a testimonial against Sunderland at the start of the season, but he said that this is his last dance this year at the age of 42. But they've obviously still got Zander Clark in the squad as well, who's a Scotland squad goalkeeper. But Hearts will need to be a lot more stable than certainly they were last year, where they leaked an awful lot of goals.
Yeah, they will. I think that was one of the downfalls of the season. And then also it was a difficult one for Shankland as well, not being able to get on the score sheet as much as we have seen him on it. So it was one of them where it's like the issues were a bit everywhere, but once they've got the defence sorted and solid and the keeper, whichever one will be the first choice this season, it'll be interesting to see. But I feel as though once they've got that cemented, everything will start falling into place for them, because that's what we've seen Derek McInnes be able to do before, and that would be a strong start for them. And like we've said, I think starting the season on a positive will be what Hearts want and what they need to see, just to see if they can bounce back from what was a disappointing season for them.
Yeah, not being in Europe, I think, will help them, because obviously you've got Dundee United, Aberdeen, and Hibernian all having early season European qualifiers to try and negotiate through. And Hearts certainly don't have that this year. So depending on how the fixtures lie when they get announced on Friday morning, we'll certainly see whether or not they can get off to a bit of a flyer or not. But yeah, goals will be a big thing for them. Shankland didn't have a good season last year. James Wilson certainly emerged as a young talent who's got a bit to go, got called up obviously for Scotland during the international didn't get a huge amount of game time under Steve Clarke, but he was involved in the squad. And Cabangu can be a bit hot and cold. We've seen him being very, very good, and we've seen him looking as if he'd never seen a football before in his life either. But it will be interesting to see how McInnes shapes him, because he's a manager who's always liked to play almost like a kind of 4-4-2 type formation, where his wingers play very heavy, and Hearts didn't really play with wingers last season very much under Critchley and Naismith. There was a lot through the middle, and they kind of got quite congested, and the squad looked a bit imbalanced at times.
Yeah, it did. When you were watching them, it was one of them, like the delivery into Shankland wasn't what it has been, and I feel as though like to now play with wingers would be more beneficial for them, and I feel as though this could help with the issues that they face in front of goal going forward, and I do feel as though a whole reshuffle in terms of formation could be what is needed to get this Hearts team going.
And certainly Tony Bloom hasn't invested 10 million quid for Hearts to finish sixth again in the Premiership, so he'll be certainly looking for Hearts to be a lot stronger this season. So we'll watch with interest in terms of what they do in the transfer market. They've still got some very, very decent players, like of James Penrice as well at left back, who had a very good season for them last year and has attracted interest from some clubs, certainly at Championship level in England, who've been looking at him. So we'll see if he remains at Tynecastle when the season starts. His replacement at Rugby Park, Kilmarnock, is another familiar face to Scottish football, and it's Stuart Kettlewell, who left Motherwell last season, kind of in February time, citing a bit of a fallout he had between himself and the Motherwell fans. But Kettlewell, like McInnes, very highly experienced at this level. Previously had been manager up at Ross County, obviously, as well. And actually, I felt had done pretty well at Motherwell, again, with very limited resources. So Kettlewell signing a 2-year deal at Kilmarnock, I think, brings an element of kind of stability to a Kilmarnock squad that, again, is going through a kind of period of kind of rebuilding. They've lost another few of their kind of better players at the tail end of last season. If you look at the likes of Danny Armstrong, who's out of contract and has left the club. So Kettlewell seems a relatively safe pair of hands, who might not be massively spectacular for Kilmarnock to watch, but should certainly be more than adequate and capable enough to get them enough results to keep them out of trouble.
Yeah, and he is a manager that gives academy graduates their debuts, which I think will be key in the future of Kilmarnock, because I feel as though this one, this signing will be a key for like the future development of the club. Like you've said, like they have had issues over the past few seasons, and it has been a rebuild for them. So I do feel as though he is going to be one of the manager to be able to try and settle this and be able to try and give them the stability that they need. He knows the Prem. He's like you've said, recent success with Motherwell, taking them to Hampden. It was an interesting one. I do feel as though him at Kilmarnock can be the turning point for them. They were kind of dragged into the relegation last season, weren't as scary as the Dundee situation when it was just one position, but they held their own, they did what they had to, the results were what they were, and they were able to keep themselves out of it. They have also signed Scott Tiffany, which is going to be an incredible signing for them, saying that through gritted teeth as a Dundee fan, but he is a talented player. He's a clear leadership experience as well, and I feel like him under Stuart will be a great relationship between them two, and to be able to integrate him into the side will be really positive as well.
Yeah, another couple of kind of really experienced players that have joined Kilmarnock as well this summer. Greg Kelty going back to the club. He's been recently at St Mirren, but very much broke through at Kilmarnock as a kind of youngster. So the fact that he's came back will certainly try and recover from obviously the loss of Danny Armstrong as a kind of like for like replacement in there. And they've also signed Jack Thompson, who's a youngster who used to be on Rangers books. Most recently been with Queen's Park, but he's just recently signed a 2-year deal with Kilmarnock as well, and he's a very promising youngster. Suffered a lot at Rangers youths with a lot of injuries, but played well with Queen's Park last season, and he'll be looking to try and kind of make that step up to Premiership level. But Kilmarnock, with that plastic pitch, as we'll see elsewhere in the league this year at Livingston and Falkirk as well, can be a bit of a leveller, and they'll certainly fancy their chances at home against most teams in the league, as they've always done at Rugby Park. But it's been their away form, particularly last season, that badly let them down.
Yeah, it's always an interesting one to go to. Like, being an away team, it is always one where you go thinking, right, let's see what we can do with this one. But yeah, away form was the issue for them last season. I do feel like this is one thing that Stuart will be able to help with in terms of like the regrouping, the rebuilding, getting the youngsters in and just trying something different, because I feel like that's what we've been lacking seeing at Kilmarnock. But yeah, the away form was one of the main issues for them last season. There were like a few others in terms of there was just a few little things of just trying to get them into matches where it was like falling behind a few times, or it wasn't the most positive season, but it will be interesting to see what they're able to do.
Stuart Kettlewell's replacement at Motherwell was Michael Wimmer, and the Austrian lasted 12 games for Park and left at the end of last season to go to the third division in Austria. He's been replaced by a Danish manager, Jens Barthel Askou, who was most recently the assistant manager at FC Copenhagen, had been assistant manager at Sparta Prague, and had been the full manager at IFK Gothenburg in the past. Only 42 years of age is Askou, so it does have a bit of experience, but again, kind of like Michael Wimmer was previously, a very left field appointment for Motherwell, who managed to avoid the kind of horses for courses type of appointment that we usually see in Scottish football, where managers do the rounds and seem to end up everywhere. They had been linked with Ross County's Don Cowie, for example. That didn't happen, and Askew has came in, but he appears to be a bit of a wild card, Rebecca.
Yeah, this was a very interesting one, and I think it came as a bit of a shock to quite a few fans. But doing a bit of research on him, he does seem a very strong signing for them. He's another one again with an aspect they want to bring into Motherwell is in his previous jobs within the Danish leagues. He brought in 26 teenagers to make their debut into squad. So again, it's looking at the younger talent coming in, which can then help the financial aspects as well. So it's going into the academy to then be able to try and see the upcoming talent, give homegrown lads a chance within the squad, which is always going to help fans be able to get on his side, because we always love seeing someone coming through the ranks at a club. And it will help with the longer term plan of Motherwell, and I feel like that will be key to try and see their future plans with this signing as well, and see how well he can do with what he can bring in, because again, it's like the links into the Danish leagues and his previous jobs will be able to see who are Motherwell going to be able to sign in this, because they have had 2 consecutive seasons where they have fallen into the bottom 6, which it's not really what we expect from Motherwell. They are a strong side, and we have seen that over the past few years, but this signing can help give them the boost that they need to be able to try and think like, right, let's see what we can do with this side.
Yeah, he's another manager who's coming in saying a lot of the things that fans like to hear in terms of a playing philosophy and wanting to play with dynamism and high tempo and all the things that Russell Martin has said as well about what he's wanting to try and do at Rangers. I think a lot will depend on what the future holds for Lennon Miller, who quite clearly is Motherwell's kind of golden goose. If they can manage to retain him, or at least manage to sell him to not Rangers or Celtic, will make it a huge difference in terms of what Motherwell will manage to do. But if he does go, he'll certainly go for a high fee, well in excess of Motherwell's record ever transfer fee received in, which will be massive in terms of giving them funds to secure the kind of long-term future of the club and maybe give them a little bit to play with. But they've never been a side that goes out and splashes the cash. If you look at players like Theo Bair, who was sold last summer, again, that brought in £1 million into the coffers, but he was never really replaced. And if Lennon was to go, it would leave a big hole that I think Motherwell would struggle to fill.
Yeah, definitely. What he can add to that Motherwell side is incredible, and I don't think they'd be able to replace him like quick. And I feel like that would be the issue that they'd face because of what he can add to that Motherwell side.
Yep. So we'll watch with interest in terms of what that looks like. More talk in the last couple of days regarding Lennon Miller's potential future at Motherwell. Again, Celtic appear to be kind of sniffing around them, been linked with Rangers in the past as well. I think the only way a move to Rangers happens if Rangers sell both of Rashkin and Diomande, which I don't think, certainly I don't want them to do. But I would possibly can see him maybe going to Celtic, which again I don't particularly want from a Rangers perspective. So I would be a lot happier if he was to move outside of Scotland. But yeah, we'll watch that one with interest. In terms of the 4 new managers that we've discussed on this show, Rebecca, Pressley, Kettlewell, McInnes, and Askou, who do you think has got the best chance of having a successful season without having your blue tinted spectacles on?
Oh, that's a bit of a tough one. I think it'll be McInnes at Hearts. I feel as though that setup and the way that he can integrate what he needs in that team, I feel as though Hearts are that is gonna be the strongest one.
I think it's fair to say he will certainly have the biggest budget of the 4 of them to play with. And given that Dundee, Motherwell and Kilmarnock were all bottom 6 clubs last season, it's not a massive stretch to suggest that's the most likely one to succeed. But Hearts is a hard gig, and we've seen managers up there struggle in the past as well. So it's by no means a given that he's going to be successful up there. We'll certainly watch with interest at very close quarters all the way through the upcoming season, and right here on the Fourth Official, both on Patreon and also on our YouTube channel, we will keep you abreast with all that's happening in and out of Scottish football. Big thank you to Rebecca for joining us on this one. A very strong debut, I think, here on the channel. If people want to find you on the Absolute Football podcast, where can they find it?
So we are the Absolute Football podcast on every social media that is possible. If anyone wants to find me personally, then all of my content is mainly ASFC Her Game 2, and the support is really appreciated. And thank you very much for having me on. It's been amazing to talk everything managers.
Yep, and we'll certainly see and hear more from Rebecca across this season here on the Fourth Official, if she'll come back, that is. Big thank you to you all for listening. We will speak to you next time. Goodbye.